Welcome, everyone. I'm Betty Casey. I'm editor of TulsaKids magazine, and we partnered with OSU-Tulsa and the Tri-City Collective to bring you Dismantling Racism, a toolkit for parents, a series of conversations about race. Last week, we had a great conversation that I think could have gone on for several hours. And so I hope that the same will happen today. Our host is Quraysh Ali Lansana, and he actually we met, OSU Tulsa helped us find him, so he's been great. I want to tell you a little bit about him before I introduce our other guest. He is the author of 20 books in poetry, nonfiction, and children's literature. He's a Tulsa Artist Fellow, writer in residence and adjunct professor at OSU-Tulsa, and a former faculty member at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the Juilliard School. Lansana is executive producer of KOSU NPR's Focus Black Oklahoma. His forthcoming books include Those Who Stayed, Life in 1921 Tulsa After the Massacre, and Opal's Greenwood Oasis. He is also a dad, and he has multiple experiences. I gave the very brief bio. So I want to welcome Quraysh to our conversation, and he'll actually be leading this session today. We have 3 high school students who have, actually one who has just graduated, who will be talking about their experiences with systemic racism and their experiences at school. So I want to welcome them. First, Alyx Frideau, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. She's a student at Broken Arrow. Jose Cruz is a student at Webster, and Alden Fuller was a Holland Hall student, but Loyola University will be the next stop on that academic career. So I want to welcome the 3 of you for coming, getting up, joining us today, and we appreciate your participation. So I'm going to let Quraysh start the conversation.
Thank you, Betty, and good afternoon, young folks, and good afternoon to all of you watching us here as we engage in this conversation about what it is to be a teenager in this city, in this area, in this moment. And as a 55-year-old old man, it's quite something for me to think about what it must be like for you all to be teenagers in this moment. So let's just start with a general question about you all are experiencing as young people, you are a part as young people of a generation that is engaged in the most sort of present, sustained, and active mass protests regarding systemic racism and social justice since the 60s, right? That's a long time. What are your thoughts on these protests? What are your thoughts on why you folks your age are in the streets in droves, and what makes this moment different than my youth, right? Or my predecessors or Betty's predecessors? Jose, let's start with you. What is it about this time that speaks to you in terms of its impact?
I think it's because of the platform we have now as far as social media and being able to reach out to like a lot of people easier. It just impacts more because that's stuff that like we get on every day, like Facebook and TikTok. Even on there, they have videos talking about it. And it's just, I don't know, it's the way that it affects you and the way it doesn't affect you that makes you think about it more and it impacts you more.
Okay. Alden, what do you think?
I think that the reason that these protests are so large and so many people from our generation are there is because what I have noticed is not for a long time because, we're teenagers, but for at least the past few years, my friends and I have had conversations about, us realizing kind of how screwed up these systems are and how almost impossible it feels sometimes to fix these problems. And I think because of the pandemic, being kept inside all day, tensions were already high. Then you add, just the blatant injustice, like the way that things went down with George Floyd and continued to go after that. I think it all just is the culmination of not even anger, but just like everybody knows that this is not right and we need to do something about it. And I really think that's kind of the driving force behind most of my generation right now.
Alyx, what do you think?
I really think that people of our generation are really fed up and tired of how corrupt our system is, and how for minorities and the LGBTQ plus community, that it feels like no one is getting the justice that they deserve. Like there are hundreds and hundreds of transgender colored people that are being killed that haven't gotten justice, African Americans, things like that. And I feel like we're tired of not having a voice and not being able to do things and seeing the change that we feel like there should be. And so I think that's why we're so passionate and so driven to protest. And like Jose was saying, we do have social media as a platform, so it's easier to get out and let people know things that are going on than I feel like it was in maybe your generation. So I just think that we're really upset and tired of the injustices that we're seeing every day and the fact that nothing's being done about it.
Okay, I want to thank you. I want to piggyback on something Alden said and sort of put this back to the three of you. And Alden said that everyone knows it's not right, but is that completely true, right? That everyone knows it's not right, because there are some folks who benefit and or perpetuate this racist or white privileged or white supremacist ideologies. So drilling down for a minute, what do you have experiences that you've had along your journeys that you can speak to that reflect maybe a situation where there are folks who actually don't know that it's not right? Have you experienced that in your schooling?
I would say I definitely have. Living in small, predominantly Caucasian towns my whole life, it's definitely something that I've dealt with. Like I can remember a specific time from like fourth, fifth, sixth grade where kids were telling me that if I was going to play with them at recess or whatever, that I had to be the slave or I had to be a donkey, or they weren't treating me like a human being. And at that age, I feel like it's not necessarily their fault because that's something that their parents are teaching them, but it shows that their parents don't understand that it's wrong either, and they're adults. So I don't necessarily blame the kids, I blame the parents and the fact that, when this was going on, it was like 2016, 2017, and, people, even back in like the 60s and stuff, people should have been treated like human beings and not animals or objects or trash or anything like that. And so the fact that today that's still happening, it really shows that people are just uneducated, or they don't care about anybody but themselves or any race but their own. I think they're just ignorant, and I think they're scared of things that they don't understand or things that are different than what they know.
Okay, that's a great answer. I'm going to circle back to that. Alden or Jose?
Yeah, I actually want to say thank you very much for pointing that out. I think sometimes, especially in today's world, being, my age, I surround myself with people who, think like me. So sometimes I forget that like outside of my, however big it is, circle, there are people that do not understand, and they are the ones that are perpetuating all of the problems that we're seeing. I guess what I meant is I think that more and more people are waking up to the fact that what's going on is wrong. And I think that's more what I meant. And I of course have I have never experienced racism, you know, because I am white, but I have seen and I have heard the stories of too many people who have, and it's I just, it breaks my heart. I know, and that's one of the biggest reasons for me to be out there fighting for this stuff, you know, because I don't know. When I see it, I just see everyone's humanity reflected in the world, and I can't not do something about it. And I think that's kind of what's happening with more people that I know, at least.
Okay. Okay. And you just touched on something else I want to get back to. So Jose, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I've definitely had, run-ins with racism, not as far as like in a school setting, but just out in public in general, going into a store and, having people watch you so they thinking you're going to steal or something. And, you don't understand it as much when you're younger. Then when you get older, you look back on those things and you start to realize like, this is why they were doing it. And then when you do realize when you're younger, it's like, why are they doing this? Because it's not fair, to just not really know what's going on, but it's being thrown at you, but you're innocent. And so it's just, there'll always be people, that don't want change, that just, I don't know, it's hard to talk about. It's like, it's always going to be those people that don't want anything to change and they feel as if everything's okay, but it's not, because there are things that are being done that are not being justified just because the color of someone's skin.
So all three of you, and it's funny to hear, Alyx say she was young. It was 2016, 2017, and Betty and I are like, oh yeah, so we were still ancient, just like we are now. But here's this is interesting though. You just touch base on things that happened to you when you were younger. So I'm wondering, and all three of you said that it didn't register to you register with you what was occurring at the time when you were younger. But I'm wondering, what do you think? How did it make you? Remember how it made you feel at the time, and do you feel like that those things happen with your younger affect who you are in some ways today? Like, does it still stick with you, or does it change the way that you think or see or feel in any way today based on those experiences from your childhood?
Definitely. I think because it was such a traumatic experience for me, and it happened for so many years, it not only affected the way I think about other people, it affected the way I treat other people. So I always treat people, my mom always said, treat people the way you want to be treated.
Right.
And that is what I do, because I feel like if anybody else was treated the way I was treated in middle school, it would really, really affect them. And it's also just made me more socially aware, socially conscious of things going on around me, other ethnic people, other minorities. And I think that's why, I support the African American community and the Hispanic community and the LGBTQ plus community, because we're all minorities. And at some point in history, whether it was 1,000 years ago or it was yesterday, all minorities were treated poorly. And I feel like, even more minorities now, we're kind of not supporting each other and trying to further each other. And I think we're better at it now, but I feel like if all minorities would kind of lift each other up and support each other, that we'd be a lot stronger, and we'd be able to handle a great many instances where we weren't treated correctly. And that's how I try to treat other people. I try to treat other people with the respect that I would want to be treated with, and the love and just the decency that I feel like every human being should be treated with.
Jose, Alden?
It definitely changed like kind of how I carry myself. Because, you know, when you're younger, you don't understand it as much. And then when you're older, you know, like seeing people being killed just for, you know, how they look and how they dress, you know, watching how you move, how you speak, you know, not trying to like raise your voice. When you have an attitude, they can look at it so wrong just because how you look. And so, you know, it kind of changes how I have to carry myself, especially being a young Black male. You know, it's just like, I can't, when like, if my pants are falling down, you know, they think I'm a thug and I try to pull them up and they keep falling down, then I have to get a belt. And then when I'm in the store getting a belt, they looking at me like I'm trying to steal. So it's just, you have to carry yourself in many different ways just because how you look, and it's not fair.
Wow. Alden, go ahead.
Obviously I cannot again speak on racism, but being a gay teen in Oklahoma has lots of its own struggles as well. And I definitely, the way I maneuver the world, I still kind of, as far as like negative behaviors go, I kind of carry some of that trauma with me. And the fact of sometimes when I'm going to a public place, you know, I might not wear my reason for oppression like on the color of my skin, but I dress pretty masculine. I have short hair. And sometimes when I walk into a place and I look around the room, I worry because it's like, I don't know if everyone in that room, you know, is going to be okay with me. And if, you know, it's a problem. And I don't know how some specifically like adults, I don't know how adults will talk to me or how they will receive me. And sometimes it really can be a spot of tension or fear for me because I'm scared that, you know, I'm going to get a Bible talk about how my sexuality is wrong or how I carry myself is wrong and my existence in the world isn't okay. And like being in middle school where all the kids are talking about how gay people freak them out and they don't think that they should be allowed to get married. And this whole time I'm sitting there and not fully realizing, you know, I'm a lesbian, but thinking like, oh, you know, it's not fully, you can't be gay, you know, it's not okay.
Right.
You don't get the same things as everybody else. And so I think that for me has definitely affected me. And it also affects me because I went through that, I can see where other people's struggles for other reasons. I think it just makes my activism more intersectional, honestly. And I am appreciative for that because I think intersectional activism is what's going to change the world. So.
Right. And you just touched on something, and actually all three of you did in a way that I want to speak to as well, and that is bias, right? And so, or implicit bias, right? Which can and racism is larger than ethnicity, right? It can speak to gender and sexual orientation and so many other things. But an aspect of this is implicit bias. And so what you just spoke to, but what all three of you just spoke to really is having experienced bias for who you are and how you move through the world. And you all agree, you already said very strongly that yes, it's wrong, but it exists, right? So how can we unpack that in your school, in your lives, in your day-to-day, going to school, going to work, going to the grocery store, or what have you? How have you experienced this bias, and how do we unpack it, particularly for young people, right? Thinking about if you could talk to some of your peers who don't think like you three do, who don't agree with you three, what could you say to them to help them think about bias or systemic racism? But let's start with bias.
Quraysh, while they're thinking about that, you guys think about that. We do have a comment that I wanted to read to you guys. I feel like this person says, I feel like a lot of people don't realize how much it affects others by being silent racist, which sort of goes to what you're talking about, like following young Black kids through the store. I feel like maybe we need more open and in-depth conversations like this on a wider scale, so more people are exposed to the dangers of stereotyping. And then someone else wanted a definition for intersectionalism, and I think Alden brought that up. But
okay.
So there was a comment and a question. And
okay. Well, let's address the comment and the question before we get back to my question about bias, right? So Alden, why don't you explain for this viewer intersectionality, what that means?
I would say it is when you, can I use an example like myself? So
yes,
I I myself, like everybody is intersectional because we all are multifaceted beings who have many dimensions and parts to ourselves. We're not just one thing. So a lot of the time, like for me, I am a lesbian, I am a woman, so I am a feminist, and I'm also a gay rights activist. I also am I don't like calling myself an ally anymore. I like to say an accomplice to the Black Lives Matter movement and to the Black community in America. So therefore, I would say that I am an intersectional activist. There's a lot of arguments today going on around like white feminism and kind of, turf feminism, people who don't include trans women as women, which is not right, but who don't really care about, equality of women of other races or of other ethnic minorities or anything like that. It's white feminism, and it's not intersectional feminism or activism right there. And so I would just say taking the time to educate yourself about multiple struggles instead of just the one that affects you the most.
Well said. I mean, the leaders, and to follow up on that, the leaders of the most recent women's marches in DC have been very sharply criticized for a lack of diversity in terms of including women of color, women of different ethnicities, women of different gender binary or sexual orientations, like trans women, have been they have been heavily criticized for that. And it actually speaks back to the women's movement in the 60s when Alice Walker and Audre Lorde started womanism, right? Which spoke to being inclusive to women of color, because they felt like Shaps Lafley and others, Steinem, were very much not inclusive of women of color at that time. So for some of us old heads, it sounded very familiar in a way. And then there was the comment about silent racists. So have you, Jose, have you experienced the silent racists?
Yes, it's like the same. Like one time, when you go out to eat and you're at your table, then you have people, kind of looking at you like with a square face, and it just, at first you don't really recognize it or notice it. Then when you like look up to look around and you see someone looking at you, and you can kind of tell like they're looking at you, but they're judging you just because how you look. You can be just in there eating, minding your business, and then people are looking at you, and then you might have a waiter come and say something. It's just, you can kind of tell with people's eyes, the way they watch you do something without saying anything, but you can feel the presence of them just looking at you in a demeaning way, to where they're thinking something in their mind that's not right, because again, you're innocent, you haven't done anything, but because the way you look, they automatically, they're watching you, and they don't have to say anything because it makes you feel uncomfortable just as a person, to know they're watching me just because how I look.
Okay. Alyx, you want to add to that?
Personally, I've never dealt with any silent racism. I know it exists. I definitely know it exists. But I've never dealt with it. Anybody who's been racist to me has been blatantly racist to my face.
Is that better or worse?
I don't know, because for someone to be silently racist to you, to look at you and be thinking, oh, well, they're going to steal something. Or my brother and I were getting onto an elevator and a white woman legitimately clutched her purse. Like my brother was going to steal it from her or something. Like watching that happen, it's so disgusting to me. And it's hard to put into words, because it's something that I feel like shouldn't happen anymore. And it's something I feel like as a country, we should be farther along than this, but we're not. And it's very, very difficult to see on a daily basis, especially with my brothers being African American men in this country, it's really hard to see. And honestly, I think silent racism is just as bad as someone being blatantly racist to your face. It hurts either way. It affects the way you think about yourself, the way you feel about yourself, the way you see other people. Either way, it's not right. It's really not. And that's why I'm so not, I don't want to, okay, I'll say excited. I'm excited that so many people are becoming active in the movement, and they're doing things to create change, and they're making people more aware of the situations that other minorities are going through, because it is time for change. And I would like for, if when I get older, for my sons to not have to deal with the things that my brothers and my dad and my grandfather, my great grandfather had to deal with when they were young. So
Yeah, I completely respect that. And unfortunately, I don't want to be dark, but unfortunately, I'm 55 years old, and you know, I have sons in their 20s in college at Wisconsin, and then two younger sons who are in Chicago. And I had hoped in the work that we had done and we're doing in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the early part of this millennium would make this different for the three of you, and it hasn't changed the needle much, right? Yeah. So again, one of the things that's been, I think, most encouraging to me, to myself, is that, and then I'm gonna flip this question on you too, has been that I have these current protests have been so diverse, right? Mm-hmm. Much more diverse ethnically and from a sexual orientation standpoint than even the marches in the 60s for civil rights with King and John Lewis, who we just lost, and others, right? Although we also have to remember that not everyone marched with King, right? So not everyone is marching with you all right now. Even kids with whom you go to school, you don't see in those protests, right? So I'm going to expand upon that a minute with, again, going back to the comment that one of the viewers put there about being silent about racism. We talked about silent racists, but then there's the idea which of being silent about racism. So I'm going to ask a really ballpark question, which I know is going to seem silly, but does everyone in your schools think like you? No. Okay, so, all right, okay. So then the answer is no. Not everyone in your schools think like you. So, are you cool with everyone at your school? Or are some folks just not talking? They're being silent. And they're not engaging in conversations or actions about these topics, about these things that have been real for centuries. You follow me? How do you navigate that, Jose?
It's definitely hard, and it definitely hurts. Like, you know, being in school and you can see how people react to you or how, you know, they move around you. Like at school, I stopped wearing my hood up just so that, you know, it doesn't throw people off, because they say, well, you have your hood up, you must be hiding something, or you're hiding who you are, or stuff like that. And so it's just, you can tell, like, when you're in a classroom with people and, you know, you be sitting over here and the teacher will tell them to do something over there close by you, and they kind of hesitate, or like the way they have their backpack out, and then, you know, you walk past their desk and they pull their backpack to them like you're going to reach in and take something. It's a lot of things that go on in school that don't really get talked about just because they're not saying it, but some actions that they're doing are showing it. And again, the way they watch you while you're doing certain things, you can feel it.
Yeah, those are called microaggressions, which we'll circle back to. Alyx.
I'm definitely not cool with everyone in my school. I'm definitely not. During this time, there were a lot of friends that I had that I felt like agreed with me and had the same mindset as me that I discovered did not. And so during this whole protest thing, I've had to cut a lot of people, a lot of friends out of my life because they, not necessarily that they didn't agree with me, because I have no problem with you agreeing with me or not. That's your opinion. You're allowed to have your own opinion. But for you to be blatantly racist or to say, I'm not trying to be racist, but you're still being racist. Saying I'm not trying to be racist, but makes what you're saying racist. So there was a lot of people that I had to cut out. There's a lot of kids at my school, a lot of Caucasian people at my school that go around saying the N-word because they feel like they can. And I'm not cool with those people. And when I hear it, I tell those people, you know, you don't know the meaning behind that word. You don't know the struggle behind that word. And it is not okay for you to say it. And, you know, like when they were talking about the microaggressions, I've seen them. No one has ever, you know, I've never been, at least at my new school, I've never had people like pull their backpack away from me when I'm walking down the aisle or anything like that. But I've seen it happen. And it happens so frequently that teachers don't say anything about it anymore. It's
Really?
like, oh, it's just another Tuesday, you know? And I feel like that's not right. And it's so frustrating for me to talk about because I get so emotional about it and I get so angry about it. But for teachers not to do anything, like that's one reason why I switched schools, because there were racist situations and teachers weren't doing anything, administration wasn't doing anything. And so for that to happen again, but in a larger setting, it makes me feel like even more that there's nothing that I can do about it. And that's not how I want to feel.
There is a question about that, and so I'm glad you're talking about that. That this person's asking about those kinds of experiences and whether or not someone speaks up, not you speaking up, but someone around you, and is no one saying anything about it? And I would think teachers, what an opportunity for them to bring forth a discussion like this. But they're not doing it, evidently. And then another question, this would be about parents giving them the talk, and how did they do that? And how did the talk happen with Alden, if that happened at all?
Okay, I do want to get back to that. That was coming up later on my list, but so
Okay.
we'll do that. I want to give Alden a chance to chime in on that, and also something that where I was going next, something that both Jose and Alyx spoke to, which is what is the culture of your schools regarding diversity and inclusion? What kind of commitment is the administration, the faculty, the staff, what have you, made to help make the school more welcoming for diversity of all types, or have they not? Right. Alden, go ahead, and then we'll go back in the.
Which thing are you? Really quick, sorry. There were like four.
Yeah, we're four. Which one you want to take on?
I don't know, just because I have personal experience with being the person that has spoken up, you know, like that was probably one of the biggest things I ever did in high school. Was I was the only person to go to the administration and report that there was a large group of boys that had made a group chat on Snapchat that was labeled the N-word, and every day they would send videos of themselves screaming it in the chat. They also would send like horrible like memes about, you know, just racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, like you name it, they had a meme on it that was not good and made you feel pretty bad. And I was I was made aware of it because my brother was added into it, and I knew that if someone else reported it and he was caught up in that, he did not ask to be in it. He's not that way, but I knew that I had to step up for a lot of reasons. But like, it was so nerve-wracking because I knew that when I stepped up, my life was going to get a lot harder because I did not trust the administration at my school to actually do what they needed to do to clean up that situation and do right by the group of students that were being actively affected by their racism. I knew that that was not going to happen, and I still made the choice to do it because it was the right thing to do. I do not regret what I did because there were steps taken to almost reconcile what happened, which is better than nothing. But I remember telling the head of the school at that point, and I looked at him and I was just like, sir, I need you to understand that I'm telling you this. I'm risking my own happiness at this place. I'm risking the happiness, or they already are unhappy, but I'm risking the safety of the kids that hang out upstairs. I'm doing these things. And if you just give these boys a slap on the wrist and just give them a couple months of detention and nothing actually happens, you are making the problem worse. You're telling them that they can get away with it and nothing will really happen. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why I go back out and I protest out in these George Floyd protests, because I see that given no pushback, they will not do anything.
All right,
And
Jose. Yeah, that's not okay. Jose, what about your school regarding actively engaging in D&I work and how you feel about its effectiveness or non-existence or whatever your truth is?
I feel as far as like a school setting, my school, they definitely touch on it and talk about it, and they do have rules against it, which I like, and they're not, I'll say like, they do give good punishments as far as for, discrimination and things like that, but I feel they could do more to stop it because it happens far too often to just not be talked about. And we have seminars and stuff about like dress code and the rules, but no one really ever goes over racism and stuff like that when we're in like big groups, like if we're in an auditorium talking about a lot of things. That's something they don't really touch on as much as they could, just to inform people and just to really let them know.
And when you say it happens far too often, what happens far too often, Jose?
Just people being, discriminated for just how they look. It happens a lot in school, and that's where a lot of problems really come from and where they really start. It's, parents telling people this or taking this from history books, and it starts there in the school setting because that's where you're at often, most of your life. You're in school, and so when it happens there, you think it'll happen anywhere, and so it changes your mindset and changes how you carry yourself a lot. And I think if they talk about it more and give more punishments on it, then it could help clear it up in a school setting.
And okay, thank you for that. And I'm going to give you all towards the end of this a chance to actually come up with something you would advise your school principal or superintendent Gist or someone to do to help make things better. I'm going to give you that, but I want to hear from Alyx, and then I know we have some questions. So Alyx, what are your thoughts on in terms of the school and the admin and their commitment to making the safe space for those of us who are other?
As I mentioned before, I moved schools my junior year. And I can confidently say that the new school that I go to, they handle racist situations better than my old school did.
Okay.
But there still isn't enough done. At my school, there isn't only racism between the Caucasian and the African American group. There are African Americans who are excluded from the African American group. There are Asians excluded from the Asian group. For example, I'm excluded from the African American group because my skin color is lighter than some of theirs. And so I don't want to say that, you know, racism is just between Caucasians and all minorities. Minorities are racist to other minorities. They're racist to their own minorities. And my school doesn't, we'll have conversations about it at my school. It's not something that is taken lightly at my school, but it happens so often that my school feels that they cannot discipline everyone.
So that's very similar to what Jose just said. Yeah. Yeah.
So
wow.
There's no way they can give everyone detention or give everyone make everyone do in-school suspension. They can't do that. So there are some kids that get a slap on the wrist. There are some kids that are punished more severely, and there are some kids that get away with it. And I feel like no one should get away with being racist. It's not something that I think should ever be taken lightly.
So what I'm hearing from all three of you is that there seems to be some degree of inconsistency from a school administrative standpoint about how these situations are addressed, if they're even addressed, and what learning and or punitive actions evolve from their being addressed, excuse me, if they're addressed, which doesn't sound, excuse me, doesn't sound very positive to me at all. Okay, Betty, we have comments?
I do have some comments. I have middle schoolers who feel the reverse racism. How do I help them navigate? And then a similar question is, okay, my daughter has girls calling her out for standing up for friends. They tell her she can't know or stand up because she's white. What do we call this? And then a few people have responded to Jana asking her not to use the term reverse racism. Please, should we not use that term reverse racism? There isn't really such a, so can we talk a little bit about reverse racism perhaps, or maybe white kids standing up and being called out for doing that because they are
excuse me,
they can't understand.
Okay. All right, we have two topics on the floor. Youngsters, take one of them on.
Can I
go?
Why first reverse racism is, sorry, I'm just saying it's not a thing. Like I'm just saying it. It's white people, we have not ever suffered like the other minorities have suffered. Therefore, if another minority is saying something to a white person or something is going on with white people, it does not have the same power that it would the white person being racist to the person of color, because white people have built up entire systems that completely disadvantage other minorities, and that there's no balancing equation to that. So it's just not a thing. But I think I understand what they're talking about with maybe kids making comments about kids being white or saying they don't like white people or something like that. And I think, you know, that is hard. And I personally, I don't know what to do about that. But at the same time, I'm old enough now and I know enough now that I recognize that it's just not the same. It's just not the same. And it might not be okay, but it's not the problem at hand.
I want to talk a little bit about the reverse racism, but also about the question that says that their daughter is being made fun of for standing up for her friends because she doesn't know the struggles and all of that. Like Alden was saying, I don't believe there's anything called reverse racism. I don't think that's a thing. I think that white people have a type of privilege that no other group of people have. And I think that some of them say that, you know, white privilege isn't a thing. It's definitely a thing. And I get, you know, people making fun of your middle schoolers because they're white. You know, I can't understand that because I'm not Caucasian, but I understand where you're coming from. And, you know, I feel like all ethnic groups need to find a place where they are confident in themselves and their race, and that things like that will, I don't want to say matter less, say like it doesn't matter, but it won't affect you as much if you are confident in your race and just kind of say, there's nothing I can do about the color of my skin. So there's that. But then I admire your daughter immensely for standing up for her friends, even though she is not African American or what other race her friends are. I admire her immensely because that is very, very hard to do at such a young age, because not only kids my age, but middle school kids are so cruel. They are so mean. Trust me.
God.
My brother is in middle school, okay? They're mean. So I admire her for standing up for her friends. And I don't believe that she should change anything she's doing. She may not 100% understand the things that her friends are going through, but for her to say, you know what, I'm here to stand by them no matter what they're going through, I'm going to support them, is probably the greatest thing that she could do. So I just want to tell her that she needs to continue to do what she's doing, because when she grows up, it's, number one, it's going to help her a great deal, but she just sounds like a fantastic person for doing that at a young age. I didn't have any friends that did that for me when I was in middle school. So she is doing something absolutely incredible.
Jose?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on when he was talking about the middle schooler being picked on for sticking up. And it's just something I like to say is you don't have to be a part of the struggle to be a part of the change.
Nice.
It doesn't matter if you're black and if you don't, or if you're white, because if you're white, you may not go through it. You can still help if you feel a certain way, because there's nothing bad about helping changing something that's wrong. There's nothing wrong about that. And so like Alyx was saying, she's really brave for doing that, because it's a lot of people, especially as young as she is, there's a lot of people that won't, even grown-ups and even people in high school, that don't speak up for other people, that don't help out when they see things are being done wrong. And for her to be doing that, it's just not right for them to be picking on her for doing that. She's doing something right for a change, and a good change that's been around for as long as some people can remember and still hasn't changed. And her being young enough to go and actually talk about it and try to help change, it's amazing.
Jose,
I
I just real quickly, Jose brought this up, and it was brought up earlier, and this is a question or a comment that came up about adults and their racism and microaggression. And all of you have sort of touched on that a little bit, because we're talking to adults here and parents and teachers. And it sounds in a lot of ways the adults are creating an environment that is not safe. So could you talk a little bit about that? And maybe it's not just that administrators need to talk to kids about racism, but maybe they need to talk to their faculty.
Yeah. It's kind of like a generational thing, I believe. Because my great-grandmother, yeah, so my great-grandmother, she's funny. This isn't as intense as the racism, but my great-grandmother doesn't understand why I have 6 piercings and I'm wanting to get my nose pierced. Because in her generation, that wasn't something that everyone did. So I think a lot of the time it's because it's what they grew up with. It's just what they continue to do and accept and put out. So like I said, the kids that bullied me in middle school, I don't think it was specifically their fault. I think it was their parents. So I do think that not only principals and faculty and teachers need to be talked to about racism, I also think parents need to be talked to about racism, because what you teach your child is going to bring to school with them. And then what they try to teach their friends, because kids are always trying to teach each other something, my mom told me this or whatever, what they teach their friends could affect what they bring home, and then affect, you know, other people they're in contact with. And then it's just kind of a really vicious circle that never really ends. So I do think parents need to be talked to.
Jose?
Yeah, because when you see a lot of racism, you see, especially if it's like a young teen, it's not a child that's being racist, it's the adult. And so if you see it there, then you know, well, that child is most likely being raised in a home where they think that's not right, or that color of someone's skin makes them a bad person or makes them not right. And that carries on to then whenever they get in school, and like Alex was saying, teaching their friends and talking to their friends about it. Then when they get older, it goes into high school and all these things, and then they become that next person that isn't for the change, and it's not good.
Alden?
Yeah, I find most of the time when I get frustrated with adults, because as we age, our brain, the neuroplasticity, like the physical neuroplasticity in our brain, it gets harder and harder. And that means it gets harder and harder to actually like physically change the way you think and what goes on in your brains. And so I think adults suffer more cognitive dissonance from people with my generation than people in my generation with people in my generation. Because, you know, so many things, like my grandfather, I love him so much, but he is 65 years old and he is so stuck in his ways, and he thinks all the protests, all that is just a bunch of BS, and we need to calm down and get over ourselves because things are not that bad, you know? And me talking about why I'm out there, the fact that I'm out there, it upsets him. And it's really hard to like stare that in the face to someone that I do love so much, but he is kind of the antithesis of everything that I stand for. And so to be able to stare that in the face, I think it really changes things, because I can see the humanity in these people, and I understand that it's genuinely because they've believed these things for so long that they have built their entire identities around these things, that if they were to change, they wouldn't be left with anything else. And that's the saddest thing. And that's what makes me sad. And so that's where I don't know how to have these conversations sometimes. Because I can talk to, you know, a 20-year-old, a 30-year-old, even a 45-year-old. But once you start getting past some of that, sometimes it gets hard, especially because they see me and they're like, "You're a kid. What do you know?" That's the first thing they go to is my age. I don't know anything because of my age. And there's times where it's just, I know that I am more educated on a subject than someone else, and it does not matter their age, because I have taken the time to do research on something that they don't even know anything about. And so, and it gets even harder because you try to present someone with facts these days, and sometimes facts, you can tell them the truth so many times and it will make them run even further in the other direction. Right. And it's a really tough problem.
It's real, but I'm glad this is being recorded, because for those of you listening and anyone who watches this after the fact, Niece, what you just detailed was one of the better explanations of systemic racism that I have experienced. I mean, you just really summed it up. And that was really, really well done. All right, I see we have another comment, and then we've got about 5 more minutes left, and I know we want to get to the talk question. So, but Betty, what's the question we got in?
It's difficult to change views of older generations, but it's a conversation that must be had. It is undeniably hard and may not end change, but at least those individuals will know their point of view is not okay. So keep talking.
Yeah.
I always say, this is what I say. So I have friends that and I've been there because I've gotten so frustrated, and I'm like, why won't you listen? Why? You know, it makes no sense to me, and it makes me so upset. And I used to get really angry, but now I've reached a point in my life where I still will have that conversation any day. You know, I love talking about it. It makes me feel good. It's one of the only times I feel like I'm really doing something worthwhile, when I'm able to talk to someone who does not believe what I believe or know what I know. And even if I walk away from that conversation feeling like they didn't really give a crap about anything I said, they're more worked up than happy about that conversation, you know, all I say to myself is, at least I planted the seed. At least I
Right.
planted the seed so that now they have to think about what I said. And even if they don't tell anyone about that conversation, what I said is in their brain and it will not leave, and it will make them think about the things that they are doing, whether they realize it or not. And that's enough for me.
Right.
Yeah. When I say, you might not listen to me and you might not agree with me, but you're going to hear me. Just because you don't agree with me, I'm not going to stop talking. I'm not going to stop my argument because I'm going to be heard, because what I'm saying needs to be said, and that what I'm saying needs to be changed. So you may not agree with me, but you're going to hear what I have to say.
Nice.
Like, even if
Okay.
I'm like the only person talking about it, at least somebody's talking about it, because it's gone so long without anyone saying anything about it. I feel like people who are completely silent are just as bad as people who say too much, like not too much about like, the change, but too much about why they hate, other groups of people or something like that. Like, there are people out there who believe that, this is what they grew up with. This is their, their ancestors have done this, and this is just them standing up for their culture and all of that. And it's like, that was so long ago. And I understand, it's hard to change your mindset and to think a different way about something, but you have to have empathy for other people. I feel like so many people nowadays, they can't put themselves in someone else's shoes and see the struggles that they've gone through. They're so caught up in themselves that they can't change their perspective and see the struggles that someone else is going through, or see that, he and I have gone through something similar, and that, we should work together or talk about it or something. They're so caught up in their ways that they can't see, number one, the pain that they're causing other people, but number two, that it may be wrong, or that it's not a healthy way of thinking. I feel like very few people nowadays have empathy. And I think that's something that more people need to have.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit over time here because we've got to get this question in. The talk, youngsters, the talk. How old were you when your parents had that talk with you about difference, about being othered? And what did they say? And remember that you've got a bunch of parents who are watching this and teachers watching this who are hoping to learn from what you say. All right? But be real about it. Who wants to go first?
I can.
Go ahead.
As the oldest, as the only girl in my family, having two younger brothers, I think I've had the talk personally 3 separate times. I had it with myself and my parents. I had it with myself, my oldest brother, and my parents, and then myself, and my 2 brothers. And it's never an easy conversation to have. I think my parents always start off the conversation with police etiquette, and if you're pulled over, how you should act, how you should always keep your hands visible, always ask the officer if you're allowed to reach and get something, always be calm, always be respectful, because anything you do wrong could end up with you losing your life. And my parents have always told us that we need to be put together, always dressed properly, dressed to impress, always act like everybody's watching, because we have to not be better, but we have to act better than white people act sometimes, because that's the only way that they will see us, kind of. It's like it's not only a respect and to act respectful for like yourself, but for your family. It's very, very hard to talk about.
It is. It is.
As a kid, my parents always said that I had to try harder. You know, people say give your 100%. My parents always said give 200%, because 9 times out of 10, as African Americans, our 100% isn't good enough. And my parents always taught me to give my all with whatever I'm doing, because there are lots of times where people will think that, you know, I'm not trying hard enough or I'm not doing something well enough. And it'll affect the way that they look at me, not only because I'm African American, but because of stereotypes that they are constantly thinking about for African Americans. But I think the main thing is for my brothers, it's, you know, always be respectful. Especially now, it's my brother loves wearing sweatshirts, loves wearing hoodies. For my parents, it's always keep your hood down, always keep your eyes up. Beware of your surroundings. Don't go anywhere without anyone else. Always make good choices. You know, because my brother's friends are predominantly Caucasian. If your friends aren't making good choices, you call somebody to come pick you up, because even if the police come and your friends don't get arrested because you're African American, you're more likely to get arrested and to have some kind of police brutality put on you. So I've had it several times. It's never an easy conversation to have. I'm always afraid for my brothers. My brother's driving now. I don't really like him to leave the house ever by himself. I'm always trying to go with him, so that, you know, if something happens to him, someone else sees it. You know, it's just really being aware of how you act around other people, because you just never know. You really never know, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, and I'm sure Kendon doesn't want to roll with his big sister all the time either.
He
We know that
really
he has a
doesn't.
driver's license.
He really doesn't.
Shout
He'll
out to
going to
Kendon.
pick up his girlfriend, and I'll be like, "Can I come with you?" And he's like, "No." Okay.
You trying to chaperone the date? Jose, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like, you know, always telling me I'm gonna have to work 10 times harder to get something that I want. And even if the next person that doesn't look like me isn't working at all, they could still get it before I do, even though I'm working 10 times as harder, just because how I look. And, you know, it's hard to actually think about that I could be doing everything right, and just because how I look, anything can happen. Just because how I look, I could lose my life for doing absolutely nothing, or I could be thrown in jail for doing nothing just because how I look. And, you know, it's hard to really think about and really talk about, because there's other people that don't agree, even though it's being thrown right in your face. You see it almost every time you look on social media, you see it, and they still have the same mindset that things are okay, or there is no difference of the way people are treated. And it's not right. I don't like it.
Is that what your parents said to you, and how old were you?
It's just like going into like middle school,
Okay.
getting ready for high school.
Okay, thank you. Alden, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
This is one of those questions and conversations where I'm put in the position of having to stare my privilege in the face, you know? And it's one of those conversations that I like to be in that position, because it's, you know, I never had a conversation with my parents that life would be different for me because I'm different, you know, because I look different. I've had my own understandings as I've gotten older, and I've changed my outward appearance that things will be different should I continue to look the way that I look like this. But obviously, me going to jail for just, you know, not using a blinker or speeding or something like that, or losing my life for one of those things, is not something that I've ever had to face or had to be worried about or had my parents have to talk to me about. It's something that I have had to learn that other people have to deal with that as I've gotten older. I did not know that, and it was, for me, it was presented like, oh, these people, all them, they go to jail because of the choices they make. That's what I was told growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that so much, seeing homeless people on the street, they ended up there because of choices that they made. People who go to prison are there because of choices that they made. And I grow up and all of a sudden I realize that's not it at all. That's not it at all. And I, and living in a more affluent white family and being a staunch activist for system change and ending systematic racism and oppression, or systemic racism and oppression, it's weird because, I kind of get put into like social justice warrior box, like, oh, Alden's going on a rant, like, or not even like a rant, but anytime I start talking, it's turned into a rant. It's turned into something so that they can shut me down so I don't have to talk about it, so they don't have to actually listen to what I have to say, because they know that I'm making valid points about why they believe what they believe is wrong. And I actually was in a situation where I was with my friend in the car, and we were stopped by police, and he is a Black male, and I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I've never had a moment where I've been scared with the cops before, because every time I've been alone, I am small, I'm white, they see me and they're like, oh, verbal warning, drive safely, be safe, be smart, you seem like a good kid. And to be in the car last night, for the first time ever, I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen to my friend? What do I do? I looked at him and I said, what do you want me to do? Like, because I will do anything I have to do to make sure that you are okay. And I don't know how to do that right now.
Wow. Wow.
It was so scary, because the first one pulls up, and then how cops are, they get bored, so the other one pulls up, and that second cop car pulls up, and we're not doing anything. We are sitting in a car. We weren't doing anything, and that other cop pulls up for no reason to just come and escalate the situation. And it went very well because we weren't doing anything wrong, but the whole time my hands were shaking, and I was just ready to jump in front of him. If anything, I don't know. I didn't know what to do, and to stare that situation right in the face and have it happen. I don't know. And that was last night.
Wow.
That was last night.
And I know that your parents had a talk with you, Alden, about not going to the north side. How old were you when that happened? Not going to North Tulsa, and why?
Yeah, that doesn't happen really anymore. But for quite a few years, if they tracked me, they looked at where I was, and they saw that I was in an area of town that was not white or rich. It was, what are you doing over there? Why are you over there? That's not a good area of town. You shouldn't be driving over there. I don't want you driving over there. And with North Tulsa, that's what I got a lot. I was probably, well, okay, funny. I was dating a boy when I was 13, and he lived in, at the time, Brady Heights. It's now the Heights. He lived in that neighborhood, and my parents would drive me there, but every time it was like, don't walk around here, don't stay in this area, like, don't do any of that. And I would tell him that my parents said that, and he lived there, and he was like, well, nothing ever happens here, like, it's actually really safe and we're fine. But because I had that fear instilled in me, I really didn't believe it until 2 or 3 years later, when I'd spent enough time over there, that I actually and I was out and I was talking to people, and I had interactions with people who lived in the area that weren't white. And I actually got to see for myself that people are just people, and they're just living their lives, and there's nothing wrong with that. And over time, it just became, they tell me not to go over there, and I'd appease it, and I'd just be like, okay, yeah, okay. And then I'm going to do what I want because I know that I am okay, and that these are all just like amped up fears that they've had for however long, because they've lived here for so long. And white people in South Tulsa, literally, it's like a dinner time conversation. Oh, North Tulsa. Oh, North Tulsa. It's weird. And it's so weird because none of them have been there. None of them know what it's like. I say Greenwood and they're like, huh? Fat Guys? Is that where that is? And I'm just like, yeah, that's where Fat Guys is. You know? So like, and it's just it's weird. And it's weird to be in a position of, you know, my whole life, the conversations they were having with me was away from the areas where other people are. And then also you can do anything you want. You're going to go anywhere you want. Like the world is your oyster, basically. And just the stark difference in that. It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about. And we could go on for another hour or more on this topic. And maybe we need to revisit that, Betty. But this has been pretty amazing conversation, as I expected.
Yes. Yeah, I hope people share this. I think everyone should listen to this. You are 3 very wise young people. And I so appreciate all of you being here and doing this, because it was amazing. And you had such great things to say and such interesting perspectives that we need to hear, I think. So sadly, I'm going to end this. I do want to remind people that next week at the same time, same day, we'll be talking about resources. So Quraysh will help us maybe come up with some actionable items and some things that parents can do. You know, we talked a little bit about parents and how parents need to be aware of how they're talking to their children. So we're going to talk a little bit about that next week, and hopefully we can move this conversation forward and take some action. And I appreciate OSU-Tulsa and the Tri-City Collective for helping put this together as well.
And I want to thank Alyx, Alden, and Jose. Thank you 3 for being bold, brave, and beautiful. You are the future. You are today, and you are tomorrow. And it's an honor to learn from you all. And I think that one of the problems sometimes with us older folks is that we don't feel like we have anything to learn, and that we don't feel like we definitely don't have anything to learn from youngsters. But that's absolutely not the case. And we do, and we'd all be in a much better place if we listen to one another intergenerationally and beyond. So thank 3 of you very much for spending an hour and 15 with us today.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.